Welcome to Echoes of the Unknown, the podcast where we explore some of the world's most fascinating unsolved mysteries. I'm Jack Montgomery, and today we're traveling to the cold mountains outside Bergen, Norway, where in 1970 the burned body of a woman was found in a remote valley locals called Death Valley. She carried no identification. Every label had been cut from her clothing. Investigators later uncovered fake passports, coded notes, wigs, mysterious hotel stays, and possible links to Cold War espionage. Nobody knows who she was or why she died there. On November 29, 1970, the quiet city of Bergen, Norway, was preparing for winter. The surrounding mountains were already cold and damp, and the isolated hiking areas outside the city were nearly deserted. One of those remote places was Isdal, a narrow, rocky valley surrounded by steep cliffs and dense forest. Locals sometimes referred to it as Death Valley because of the number of accidents and suicides that had occurred there over the years. That afternoon, a man named Harold Anderson was hiking through the valley with his two young daughters. As they moved through the rocky terrain, the girls suddenly noticed something unusual ahead of them. Lying among the stones was what appeared to be a badly burned body. The man immediately notified authorities. Police arrived quickly and discovered a horrifying scene. The victim was a woman lying on her back in a partially seated position. Much of her body had been severely burned. Nearby, investigators found a collection of strange items scattered around the scene, including melted plastic bottles, rubber boots, a broken umbrella, jewelry, a wristwatch, burned clothing, and traces of gasoline. The woman's face and upper body had suffered extensive fire damage, making identification extremely difficult. But investigators quickly noticed something even more disturbing. Every identifying label had been carefully removed from her clothing. Tags had been cut from shoes, coats, and personal belongings with deliberate precision. In the days immediately following the discovery of the body, Norwegian newspapers began referring to her by the name the Isdal woman. Almost immediately, investigators suspected this was not an ordinary suicide. The autopsy revealed a deeply confusing set of findings. The woman had consumed a large quantity of sleeping pills before her death. Toxicology tests later showed that she had ingested more than 50 phenobarbital tablets, a powerful barbiturate. Soot particles found in her lungs indicated she had still been alive while the fire burned. But there were also bruises on her neck suggesting possible trauma. Some investigators believed she had taken her own life. Others suspected she had been murdered and the scene was staged to resemble a suicide. The woman herself remained a complete mystery. She appeared to be somewhere between 30 and 40 years old, approximately 5'4", with dark brown hair and brown eyes. Dental work suggested she may have grown up somewhere in Central or Southern Europe, while her fingerprints failed to match any known records in Norway. But the real mystery began several days later. At Bergen railway station, investigators discovered two suitcases that had been left in a locker. Inside, they found an extraordinary collection of items. The suitcases contained wigs, sunglasses, cosmetics, clothing, currency from multiple countries, maps, notebooks, and several spoons coated with traces of makeup. Once again, every identifying label had been removed. Investigators also discovered something even stranger, a coded notebook. Inside was a series of seemingly meaningless combinations of letters and numbers, O22N, S14B, and M23N. At first, the codes baffled investigators, but eventually they realized the entries likely represented dates and travel locations. By decoding the notebook, police reconstructed a timeline showing that the woman had traveled extensively throughout Europe over the previous months. She had visited Norway multiple times while using a variety of false identities. That discovery transformed the case. Norwegian authorities soon learned that the woman had checked into hotels under at least 8 different aliases. She frequently claimed to be Belgian, though investigators suspected this was false. Hotel employees described her as elegant, well-spoken, and highly secretive. Witnesses recalled that she often changed her appearance using wigs. She would sometimes request rooms with balconies facing particular directions or ask unusual questions about nearby military activity. At some hotels, she reportedly spoke German, while at others she appeared to understand French. Some witnesses believe she may have spoken English with an accent. Yet despite the many interactions she had with hotel staff across Europe, no one could determine her true nationality. One hotel employee later described her as sophisticated but nervous. Another recalled that she carefully avoided casual conversation and often seemed uncomfortable when asked personal questions. As investigators retraced her movements, they uncovered an increasingly suspicious pattern. The woman had traveled repeatedly through areas near sensitive Norwegian military installations. During the Cold War, Norway occupied a strategically important position because of its proximity to the Soviet Union in the North Atlantic. At the time, Bergen itself was considered strategically significant due to naval activity in the region. That fact fueled growing speculation that the Isdal woman may have been involved in espionage. Then came another unsettling revelation. An eyewitness eventually came forward claiming he had seen the woman several days before her death, hiking in the Isdal Valley with 2 men. According to the witness, the woman appeared distressed or frightened. The account raised the possibility that she had not gone into the valley alone. Yet despite the growing evidence of suspicious activity, the Norwegian investigation quickly encountered enormous obstacles. There were no missing persons reports that clearly matched the woman. Her fingerprints failed to produce any identification. The fake passport she used could not be tied to a real identity. And perhaps most frustrating of all, many records related to international intelligence activity during the Cold War remain classified. Some investigators privately believed they were dealing with a spy. But if she truly had been involved in espionage, for whom was she working? Theories quickly multiplied. One possibility was that she worked for Western intelligence agencies, perhaps monitoring Soviet naval operations in Norway. Others speculated she may have been connected to Eastern Bloc intelligence services, while another theory suggested she was involved in illegal smuggling or black market operations across Europe. Still others believed she may simply have been a troubled woman living a double life. But several key details continued to push investigators back toward espionage. The wigs and disguises, the coded notes, the multiple fake identities, the systematic removal of labels, the suspicious travel routes, and the apparent surveillance of military locations all pointed towards someone who was deliberately concealing both her identity and her movements. Individually, each detail might have seemed explainable, but together, they painted the portrait of someone operating in secrecy. Norwegian intelligence services reportedly became involved in the investigation, though exactly how much remains unclear even today. Over time, rumors spread that the case had connections to international spy networks operating throughout Europe during the Cold War. Some researchers later pointed to possible ties to Mossad, the Israeli intelligence service, while others suggested links to the KGB or NATO intelligence operations. But despite decades of speculation, Hard evidence never emerged. One of the most frustrating aspects of the case involved the woman's dental work. Investigators believed her teeth might hold clues to her origin because of the unusual materials and techniques used in several fillings and crowns. Experts suggested the work may have been performed somewhere in southern or central Europe, and decades later, forensic specialists continued analyzing her teeth in hopes of narrowing down where she had grown up. In the months following her death, the mystery gradually faded from public attention. The Isdal woman was buried in an unmarked grave in Bergen in February 1971. And because her identity remained unknown, authorities held a quiet funeral attended mostly by police officers and journalists. Yet even in death, the mystery refused to disappear. As years passed, journalists, amateur investigators, and documentary filmmakers repeatedly returned to the case. Why had every label been removed? Why had she traveled under so many aliases? Who were the two men reportedly seen with her before her death? And perhaps most importantly, who was she really? Then, decades later, advances in forensic science brought renewed attention to the mystery. In 2016, Norwegian journalists working with the BBC launched a major investigation into the case, and modern forensic testing was performed on preserved evidence, including the woman's jaw and teeth. Isotope analysis suggested she may have spent her childhood in or near the border region between Germany and France, before possibly moving eastward during adolescence, a finding that aligned with long-standing suspicions that she originated somewhere in Central Europe. Investigators also reconstructed her face using updated forensic techniques, allowing the public to look into the face of the Isdal woman with far greater clarity for the first time in decades. The renewed investigation generated thousands of tips from around the world, but despite claims from people who believed they recognized her or knew someone resembling her, no definitive identification ever emerged. Even today, experts remain divided over the manner of her death. Supporters of the suicide theory point to the sleeping pills in the isolated location, but critics argue that too many elements feel staged. Why would someone attempting suicide carefully remove labels from every item she owned? How did the bruising on her neck occur? Why did witnesses report seeing her with two men shortly before her death? And why did she appear to spend months operating under false identities throughout Europe? There is also the strange matter of the burned items found around the body. Some investigators believe the fire may have been intended to destroy evidence or make identification more difficult, while others noted that portions of the scene appeared oddly arranged. More than half a century later, those unanswered questions continue to fuel speculation. And perhaps that is what makes this case so enduringly unsettling. Unlike many unsolved mysteries, this one feels as though pieces of the truth are scattered everywhere, hidden within hotel ledgers, intelligence archives, forgotten witness statements, and Cold War secrets that may still remain classified. Somewhere, at some point, the Isdal woman had a real name. She had a childhood, a family, and perhaps people who spent decades wondering what happened to her. Yet, despite one of Europe's largest unidentified person investigations, the woman discovered in Norway's Death Valley remains officially nameless. And if she truly was involved in espionage, the full story of her life and death may never become public. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Echoes of the Unknown. If you found this story compelling, please don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share with fellow mystery lovers. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and remember, Sometimes the most carefully hidden secrets are the ones buried alongside the people who carried them.